I finished Lord of the Rings. Let's sit down and talk about this because this is oh oh my gosh, let me bring it closer. Oh, because we've got some stuff to talk about. So welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here for the first time, welcome. If you don't know me, my name is Angela, and I find my paradise through reading. And finally, at long last, something that's been on my TBR for maybe, it feels like years and years and years, just never could find a way to get around to it. I keep hearing, like, I gotta do it, I gotta do it. And I did it. I did it. I just finished, well, not just last week, but I finished the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Where is it? It's right here. Oh my goodness. All right. Was it originally a trilogy? Because I think it was just like one big book. And then it got broken down into 3 books. I'm not sure. I don't know. But, and what reminds me of that is like, this is the version that I have. So, oh my goodness. Yes. So we have the Fellowship of the Ring, the Two Towers, and the Return of the King, J.R.R. Tolkien. And these are Clarion Books. Okay. So with this set, like it goes, I think from the pages continue from one book to the next, like it's one big book. So like the Fellowship of the Ring ends at 500 and some pages, but then when you start the Return of the King, it starts on page, this is Return of the King. Fellowship, yeah, I don't know, this says it starts on 900 and, oh no, that's the Return. Okay, no wonder. So yeah, when you get to the Two Towers, which is book 2, it starts on page like 511, and then it ends like, I don't know, like 900 and something. And then the final book, when you're starting that, it starts at page 929. Okay, so it's numbered like it's just one big book. And I've seen versions of the Lord of the Rings in one big book. This was a lot more doable for me, breaking it down into 3 separate books. And goodness, I have a lot to say about this. I don't even know where to start. As always, my videos are unscripted, so whatever I vomit out, I hope you can somehow make some sense of it. But let me start with just like an initial, just something that I hear people saying in videos. You know, that they always recommend the Lord of the Rings trilogy or the Lord of the Rings for people who want to start reading fantasy, or people aren't that familiar with fantasy and they're like, hey, what do you recommend? And then they say, oh, the Lord of the Rings. I would say no. I would not recommend, and you know, don't hate me. Okay, this is just my opinion. I wouldn't recommend it for someone who's just getting into fantasy. And just the reason I say that is just there's a lot. This is epic. This is a lot for someone new to the fantasy genre to take in. And there are so many different kinds of creatures. So you have like the elves, dwarves, hobbits, wizards, orcs, half human, half orc things. So someone who maybe isn't that familiar with fantasy, won't understand the significance of like an orc and how terrible they can be. Um, but then there's just a lot of things that they may not be familiar with, like objects that are imbued with magic, or imbued with like the essence or partial spirit, or of a person, or wards, when wards are set up. Someone who's not that familiar with fantasy may not understand, well, what's a ward, and you know what's so significant. And then I feel like in the Lord of the Rings, there's, I guess, a lot of magic that aren't isn't really well explained, I think. So that's just my opinion. I feel like that's why I just wouldn't recommend The Lord of the Rings, because it's just a really deep, very intense uh fantasy to begin with. Uh I mean, honestly, you can get into fantasy with something like very, very light. You can, and I guess it depends on your age. I could even recommend Legends and Lattes as a very beginner friendly, like, hey, there's an orc, there's wards, there's some magic that's explained. So the Travis Baldry books would be like a cute beginner, or even something like Iron Wing or Fourth Wing, because I feel like there's magic, there's dragons, and there's all that, and there's wards. Okay, so some of that is explained in a book like Fourth Wing, and the people have magic capabilities, and it's explained. So it would be explained what, like, someone someone who has control of shadows, like what that means and what they can do with something like that. Um, but yeah, there's just like other books I feel like I would recommend over something that's a little more difficult and involved. But honestly, if you're like ready for the challenge and you're like, whatever, I saw especially if you saw the movies, that helps a lot. But totally, yeah, I recommend this. For anyone who's up for a challenge, anyone who's already obviously into fantasy and love fantasy, recommend it. If Yeah, this is pretty cool. I mean, I think this would have been a bit much for me if I didn't have like any kind of background in reading fantasy books, and I hadn't seen the movies. So I'm gonna start off with that. Now, did I enjoy this? Yeah. And I felt like I enjoyed it more and more as I went along. I started caring more and more about the characters and their relationships with each other. And there was some humor in there. There were just some heartbreaking scenes in there. I mean, I enjoyed it. I did. The only parts I say that I didn't enjoy so much was, um look, I'm geographically challenged, okay? So this was a lot of world building, and when they are talking about like all of these places with not just like so many different places, but they all have weird names, and they're talking about, coordinates almost, like, it's to the west, and we're going to go to the north, and then down south there's this, and just I would just like, I can't picture it. I can't picture it. Like, if I'm in my own town and I turn on my GPS and it tells me to head west, I'm done. I don't know if I'm going left or right, okay? I cannot. So I can't picture it. It's really difficult for me. So I didn't like that part where it was just a lot of planning uh, a route. So that was a bit much. And then the wars, the battles, and the strategies, and all of that. Not so much my thing. Uh, But what I already said what I like was the characters. Ooh, oh my goodness. And yeah, I mean, by the time I finished the third book, I wanted to go back to the first book and read it again, knowing like what I guess like knowing what I knew and about the characters, reading it from the beginning again, I feel like would just give me a whole new appreciation because I didn't really care about them that much in book one. It's like, oh, okay, the hobbits are cute, and the Shire, the description of the Shire, that's cute. Um, and and I just want to go back and see the relationship, especially with Legolas and he's the elf, and Gimli, the dwarf, and just to see that develop again. Because I don't remember, I feel like they started off on bad terms, or they just weren't that close or that impressed with each other, and just to see how close they got by the end. And then I kind of dismissed Merry and Pippin. I was just like, oh my gosh, they're just silly little hobbits. They're just like kind of along for the ride. They're not really whatever. But then, I just loved them so much by the end. And now I want to like go back and like read from the beginning and you see what I just missed in passing just because I was flying through it and I just didn't really care that much. Um, so yeah, I definitely want to read this set again. I do. I really, really, really do. So the first book, The Fellowship of the Ring, I read physically. And then by the time I got to The Two Towers and The Return of the King, it was like pretty much like spring, early summer was starting, and I was had a lot to do like outside of my house and gardening. I have a vegetable garden and I'm like canning and preserving and whatnot. So I downloaded the audiobooks for these two. And the versions I downloaded were narrated by Andy Serkis, Serkis, and he's phenomenal. Phenomenal. Like I still can't believe that all of these different voices came from one person. And if I'm not mistaken, he's the one that actually did the voice for Gollum or Smeagol, whatever you want to call him, that little creature thing. So, and he did that voice for the movie. But he was just phenomenal. It was a phenomenal, phenomenal listening experience. So I got those through Audible. And then since I had the last two, I was like, well, let me get the first one, The Fellowship of the Ring, and have that audiobook um, in my library. Now, I'm not sure. I guess you would have to have an Audible membership, but the Fellowship of the Ring was free. Like I didn't have to use a credit in one of my Audible credits at all. And not only that, but The Hobbit, which I believe is also, was it also narrated by Andy Serkis? But I'm listening to this now, and that was also free. I did not have to use any of my Audible credits. So go check it out. Like I could be crazy or making things up. I don't know, but it did not use any of my credits. Both of them I downloaded to my library absolutely free. So so that's cool. But yeah, look, The Hobbit, and this is what I'm listening to now, and this is so far the story of Bilbo Baggins, which is the Hobbit that found the Ring of Power when he was on an adventure with Gandalf and a team of dwarves. So this is all before all of this happened, and it's a good time. It's a good time so far. I'm really, really, really enjoying it. Um, oh my gosh, what else am I going to say about this book? Because or these books, it's just holy Hannah. I'm pleasantly surprised. I'm pleasantly impressed. I'm absolutely going to listen to all of these again, probably quite soon, honestly, because I really, really enjoyed listening to it. And I watched the first movie when before I started The Two Towers, and after I had read this one, I watched the first movie, which I hadn't seen in like so many years. And I just saw it with like a whole new set of eyes and a whole new appreciation for exactly what was going on. Because in the movies, it doesn't fully show what that ring is doing to Frodo, the hobbit that's, burdened with this ring. And, you're just like, what's the big deal? What's like, what is going on? Um, yeah, so reading the books, like you know a lot more of the history and you know what's going on internally and what that struggle is. So it's really, really I just watched the movie with like still completely, totally still have a big crush on Legolas. Okay, that's just still my dude. Like he is awesome. He's my favorite character in the movie. Um, that's awesome. So I do want to watch the other movies of the Lord of the Rings before I listen to these again. Honestly, because I just feel like there's so much to take in, and I honestly do feel like I can like reread and these books and rewatch these movies and get more again and grab things that I didn't understand or grab things that I missed. And I can see why there's such a huge following and fandom for The Lord of the Rings and why it's like a classic and why it's just the biggest deal. Like it really is a huge deal. I think one of the final things that I would say about this, like my favorite character. Okay, look, in the movies, love Legolas. I love him. I love the look of the elf. I love his skill with the bow and arrow, his agility, his just the way he carries himself. Just like it's so cool. He's just so cool to watch. So he's my favorite character, like in the movies. In these books, my number one, ultimate like number one character is Sam Gamgee, the Hobbit. And this guy, he is the ultimate MVP of this story. Ultimate MVP. This Hobbit was so strongly dedicated to Frodo. Like, it just brought tears to my eyes. It still brings tears to my eyes. Like, how much he loved Frodo and how much he cared for him and how brave he was and some of the things that he had to do and endure. Oh, look, I'm not going to cry about this. Like, Sam Gamgee was it. He was everything. None of this would have happened without Sam. Like, Frodo would not have succeeded with the task. It was just like, no, like, oh my gosh, Sam was everything to the very end. To like, if everybody had a best friend like Sam, like the world would be a better place, 100%, because I need someone like Sam in my life, you know? Oh my God, Sam. Oh, I loved that. Another thing that I liked about this book were the names. Um, you know what? I just realized I don't even have the lights on. It's getting dim. Hold on. Let me see if this helps. I have so many freaking light switches in my house. Like, I don't know if you heard, like, I had to try 3 different switches before I figured out which one it was. That's so sad. That's so sad. But no lie, there's like, oh gosh, there's so many light switches. Anyways, but another thing that I can say that I really liked were like the names of these characters, and especially the sibling names. One thing that I absolutely loved was like the sibling pair, uh, Arwen, and her brother's name was Eowyn. So I was like, oh my goodness, Arwen and Eowyn, like so beautiful. And then you had the two brothers, Boromir and Faramir. I was like, how cute. And then you have Galadriel. Like the name alone is hard to say just regularly, like Galadriel. Like it's so powerful and so beautiful. And Galadriel, like you can't not love her name and her character. Ooh, and what was the other? I love the names. And then, oh, here's one thing. I mean, this might be a spoiler if you haven't seen the movie or the Lord of the Ring. Well, if you haven't seen the movies or read the books, major spoiler. Okay, so like, don't listen to me. But basically, the main thing that's going on in this trilogy is you get the ring of power, right? Frodo has to take this ring of power to Mount Doom, drop it in the fires of Mount Doom to destroy it. Okay? You need to destroy this thing, right? Because if not, Sauron's gonna like take over the world and this is gonna be a disaster, okay? That's the whole thing. That's what's happening through this whole book. That's everything is surrounding getting this ring to Mount Doom and destroying it. That is their only hope. Okay. Here's what surprised me. When that ring uh, got destroyed, I'll just say that. When it was destroyed, you're thinking, end of story, right? End of story. The ring got destroyed. That was the whole point. That was the whole plot. That's what it was. You think that the story would end? No. Sir Tolkien was like, no, I am on a roll. I'm going to keep this going. And I am going to wrap this up with a nice little bow. And he tied up every single loose end. He, for every character, every important character, he brought back into the story and just was like, what happened? What happened with this soldier that went against the king and left his post to save Faramir's life? What happened to that guy? You know, and it goes into that. What happened, you know, with the Hobbits? What happened with um um I don't want to say Aragorn, you know, Aragorn, and what did he do with once he claimed the throne? And uh Galadriel, what happened with Gandalf? What happened with Sauron? He even told you what happened to Bill, the little pony that they had in the beginning of the Fellowship. In the beginning of the story, there was this pony that Sam just absolutely loved. His name was Bill. He even told you what happened with Bill. He followed the hobbits back to the Shire and what happened when they returned. What happened with Bilbo Baggins, and it just kept going, and then you're just like, you just felt so full and so satisfied that they didn't, you know, that J.R.R. Tolkien didn't just end the story when the ring was destroyed and they were successful. It was like, okay, you know, they did it, and then you're just like, yay. But this, because it just went on, and I mean, I'm talking about, this was not like a short wrap up. Okay. This was not like a PS, so and so was here, so and so did this, like they do like in the end of movies sometimes. Um, no, like I think the audio book went on for like another 8 hours or so. So I probably spent like a couple days listening to what happened after the ring was destroyed. Oh, my goodness, just like the rebuilding and the weddings and coronations and the recognition that these hobbits received, like I was crying. Like when like I think Aragorn, even he kneeled to the hobbits, and then all of everyone was kneeling to these hobbits. And I mean, and the Ents, and just everyone saying, that hobbits will now, because some people didn't even know the hobbits existed. They're like, what are these things? All throughout the book, they're like, where these things come from? What are these halflings? And they're like, we're hobbits, and it's like, we've never heard of hobbits. Like, what? And some have heard of hobbits or halflings, but thought they were just a myth, like a story, like, oh my gosh, you things actually exist. They call them hole dwellers. They're hole dwellers. So I mean, to see that the entire world was going to recognize hobbits and their contribution and how important they are, and just, oh my god, I loved it. It just gave you so much. And then to see the character development, from the very beginning, when they were just, these hobbits have lived a peaceful life. They've lived peaceful lives their whole time in the Shire, very well hidden, very well protected. Obviously, people didn't even know they existed, right? So very, very just, and they didn't travel. They just were so happy with their gardens and their little hobbit holes. And it's just so freaking precious. And so they're so sweet. They're not warriors or anything. So when they go off on this journey, I mean, they're met with a heck of a lot of difficulty and horrors, and um they're attacked, they're kidnapped, they're just, everybody's after them. And and they were just so scared all the time, like, oh my gosh, and they're running and trying to hide, and they're just terrified. And then to see how brave they were in that final book, like, oh, they were so brave, these little halflings, and they did big things. They did the biggest things, and it just brought me so much joy. Yeah. I mean, you could tell how I'm gushing about it, like how much I really, really enjoy this book. The little halflings, the little hobbits, gosh, oh my goodness, I adored them, and just the growth in their character. Two of them grew in height, too much of that ent juice. Um, and then just even growing um in wisdom, and how Frodo handled Saruman at the end, and how he was, just like with mercy and trying to be understanding, and trying to just, like, hey, like, whatever, and even not wishing, for death or battles or fighting, and he was just operating it in so much wisdom. And even Saruman had to acknowledge that. He was like, wow, you've grown in wisdom. And he was just impressed. And then I'm not going to say exactly what happened, because I don't want to, like, spoil it that much. But I loved, was this Sam's reaction or Merry or Pippin? Maybe it was Sam's reaction to what happened to Saruman. And then he was like, well, I wish I wasn't here to see that, but like, I wish I wasn't here to see that, but that takes care of that problem, and it kind of made me laugh. Um, yeah, oh my goodness. Definitely. I recommend this, guys. Like, give it a go. Give it a go if you haven't read it. Definitely. And again, the audiobooks, you can't go wrong. Andy Serkis, get those versions. He should get an Oscar. I mean, I will listen to anything that Andy Serkis narrates now, because he is so horribly talented. I just cannot cannot believe it. I mean, so much so that I was watching videos of when he was narrating The Lord of the Rings. And I was watching the videos and I was watching him change voices. And I was so impressed. Like, it's really him. Like, he really did that. Wow. Oh my gosh. So I'm going to leave you guys with that. Let me know if you've read The Lord of the Rings and what you thought about it. Is it as good as everybody's saying? Is it as good as what I'm saying? Like, what were your favorite parts? Please let me know, because I need to talk about this. I need to reminisce. I need people bringing up scenes that maybe I forgot to mention, because there were so many good ones. There were so many good ones. Holy Hannah. Guys, let's talk about this. Put everything in the comments below, because we need to talk this through, okay? So, anyways, I will let you go. Happy reading to you guys, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.